Back now to President Biden's decision here to drop out of the race. Biden ending his re-election bid today and endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris. The president says he will finish his term, and it comes on the heels of his poor debate performance, which prompted many Democrats to urge him to step aside.
Biden says it's been his greatest honor to serve as president. The Night Team's Dan Housley live in the newsroom with more on this timeline of the historic decision. Dan?
Well, the president making this announcement in a public letter today after discussions with staff members started last night. President Biden has faced scrutiny for weeks after a disastrous debate performance with former President Donald Trump. Democrats also raising concerns about the president's health following his COVID diagnosis. More and more high-ranking members came forward publicly in recent days to call for the president to step aside, calls he finally answered today. The president's letter saying, "It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president. And while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interests of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term." President Biden immediately throwing his support behind as Vice President Kamala Harris. Biden encouraged Democrats to support Harris. She's now the favorite for the party's nomination at its August convention. Following the announcement, Vice President Harris released a statement of her own saying with this selfless and patriotic act, President Biden is doing what he has done throughout his life of service, putting the American people and our country above everything else. I'm honored to have the president's endorsement, and my intention is to earn and win this nomination. Our 7 News pollster with Emerson College weighing in on what this decision means.
If she does get a bump in these polls, there's definitely polling out there that has taken a look at the race with her in there. But as an actual candidate, but before we get too far ahead of ourselves, Rob, she is not the official nominee. Remember, these delegates have been sworn to President Biden, and then they could be released, in which case they could vote for any candidate that they choose. It looks at the early stages that the vice president's got the inside track, but it'll be interesting to see if any other candidates try to throw their hat in the ring at this time.
Former President Barack Obama praising President Biden, saying Joe Biden has been one of America's most consequential presidents, as well as a dear friend and partner to me. Today, we've also been reminded again that he is a patriot of the highest order. Former President Trump also weighing in on Biden's historic decision to drop out. Trump posting on Truth Social saying, "Joe Biden is the worst president by far in the history of our nation. He has done everything possible to destroy our country, from our southern border to energy dominance, national security, international standing, and so much more." Biden says he'll speak to the nation later this week with more detail about his decision. Live in the newsroom, Dan Housley, 7 News Night Team.
And reactions pouring in from lawmakers tonight.
Governor Maura Healey, who was one of the Democratic governors invited to the White House following President Biden's disastrous debate, writing, "President Biden's decision today to not seek re-election is the ultimate example of putting the country first, something Joe Biden has done over and over again in his unparalleled career. We are all deeply grateful to President Biden for his lifetime of service." And 2 prominent members of the Democratic Party who were largely critical of President Biden showing their support for the president today. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying, quote, "President Joe Biden is a patriotic American who has always put our country first. His legacy of vision, values, and leadership makes him one of the most consequential presidents in American history. God bless America with Joe Biden's greatness and goodness." And House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries saying, quote, "President Joe Biden is one of the most accomplished and consequential leaders in American history. America is a better place today because President Joe Biden has led us with intellect, grace, and dignity."
President Biden's decision to drop out of the race hasn't been done by an incumbent president in decades. Tonight, we're getting a closer look at what this means for the Democratic National Convention next month.
The Democratic Convention set to look very different next month. Even though President Biden has backed Vice President Kamala Harris, it's not guaranteed she will secure the party nomination. Harris will have to win a majority of delegates at the convention like any other candidate. And she says she plans to earn and win the nomination.
The vice president now is making a really smart move, especially in her initial statement, that she was not going to take this for granted. She was going to go out and earn the support of the members of her party.
Historians say this is a momentous year in politics.
I think in some ways this is the most consequential year since 1968, since Lyndon Johnson on March 31st stunned the nation by saying he would not run again.
In the last 75 years, only 2 presidents stepped aside during an election year, Harry Truman and Lyndon B. Johnson.
I shall not seek and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
In both cases, the Democrats who became the nominee lost the general election to Republicans, and both candidates faced competition for their party's nomination, whereas Biden did not.
Biden has a lot of accomplishments, but politically, I think that it's one of the criticisms that will be made of him. He kind of stifled other Democrats from really kind of blossoming and to be viable national figures.
Biden has exited the race later than any previous president, and he's the first president to be pressured not to run again over concerns about his mental fitness. As for what's next, the Democrats were scheduled to vote on the presidential nomination remotely before the party's convention on August 19th. It's not clear if the party will stick to that plan or allow for a formal vote on the convention floor. Now that Biden is no longer a candidate, his delegates are free to vote for whoever they want. He does not need to formally release his delegates. Now all eyes are on how the Democrats will respond.
Between now and the Democratic convention, all the attention is going to be on the Democrats. And I think there'll be a big political benefit just to having all the attention and the publicity.
And the chair of the Democratic National Committee says there will be a, quote, transparent and orderly process to move forward, but did not share details about what that process looks like. And stay with the news station for continuing coverage of the president's decision to drop out. We'll have the latest on air, online, and on the 7 News app.
And the night team will be right back.